Okay, that bell means that it's time. Thank you guys so much for coming to our Boulder Chamber Candidate Forum. I am going to quickly introduce our new Senior Director of Policy Programs, who's then going to reintroduce me before we get started. But Jonathan Singer, who served in our state legislature, is just
I always think it's interesting when people clap before I start talking. So I'm Jonathan Singer, and it is my pleasure to pick us off today with a county commissioner, county sheriff candidate forum. If that wasn't enough alliteration for you, I can't help you. Basically, what I wanted to do before we begin is Jill is going to be wrapping up with us very shortly and moving on to graduate school to continue to work on her passion on affordable housing. So before we commence with the pleasantries, who you should be really clapping for is for Jill for her service with the chamber. I'll take a step back with Boulder City Council. And with that, I want to also share a special thanks to our sponsors. Next slide. This is also our test of the Google and WW Reynolds companies for being here today, for making sure that lunch was provided and making sure that we crinkle our paper bags now and not before our candidates speak. So without further ado, let's bring back Jill to commence with what is hopefully a lively discussion, and then we'll see what things go from there. Thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan. This is Buck, who's with us today. Well, thank you for being here. So today, these are your primary candidates in the Democratic primary. So you can only vote, you're going to have to vote, hopefully vote for one or the other of them, but only if you're registered Democrat or independent. So check your registration, make sure it's up to date. The primary election is June 28th. If a strong candidate from another party emerges, we may have a second one of these, but really kind of the action in this year's county commissioner race and this year's sheriff race is right now in this primary. So please, June 28th, mark it on your calendars, remember to vote. And the way that we're gonna go here is we'll have 3 minutes where the candidates will get to introduce themselves. We then have some prepared questions, and then they'll do a 3-minute sort of closing remark, and then we'll have about 10 or 15 minutes of Q&A, and then we'll switch and we'll do the same thing for the sheriffs. So these are our county commissioner candidates, then we'll move to sheriff. Everyone has note cards at their table and pens. If you have questions, please write those on the note card and then have them make their way to Devin Edgley here, our policy program specialist. Thank you, Devin. And we'll be sure to get your questions answered. If questions aren't answered, the candidates are happy to take them and answer them. They can follow via email, or we're happy to do that. And I'm so sorry to make this about me for a second, but a special person's in the audience today. I just proposed to the woman of my dreams. Okay, awesome. Well then, without further ado, I am going to introduce Elaina Shively and Mayor Ashley Stolzman. Elaina, we'll start with you, and then we'll move to the mayor.
Okay. Is it okay if I stand?
Of course.
It looks like this thing is following me. So I was whispering to Ashley, like, where's the camera? So before I get started, if I can have like 2 seconds, Buck is a certified facility service dog. He's getting schlepped along with me today because I'm running from wearing different hats today. So just know that he's a social service dog, so you are allowed to touch him if you would like to touch him, or a solid don't will tell him that you don't want to touch him. He would just remind you that if you pet him, he is helping you. And so that's how he rolls, is that he likes to get that attention. My name's Elaina Shively. I'm running for county commissioner. I'm born and raised in Boulder County. I grew up Sugarloaf Mountain, and I now live in Lafayette with my husband, Lane, who's a nurse at Boulder Community Hospital. We have 2 kids. They are 5 and 9 and in elementary school. I am a product of Boulder Valley School District. They will be. We're really excited. And I'm also a proud Buffalo. And so I have an undergrad degree and a law school degree. After law school, I went through law school with social justice background, sociology degree. I became a public defender. And so the reason I like to stand is that I'm a former trial attorney. So I like to say that I'm in recovery from that. And I now do program development for the county. So 8 years ago, I was hired by Stan Garnett to implement restorative justice and alternatives that help improve our outcomes in the criminal justice system. If there are 2 issues I hear about every day, it is public safety and our environment, and that those things broach everything that we are all talking about. So housing, transportation, economic vitality, business, our unhoused population, and climate action. And those are places that I have special expertise in terms of working with mental health, substance use disorders, managing change in a collaborative way. I just realized how fast I was talking. I'm gonna take a breath. Managing that change in a collaborative way so that it's sustainable and effective and we get the outcomes. And we should be held accountable at the county and through our leadership for those outcomes. And so when I think about what Boulder County means to me and growing up here, 1, I grew up in a house that was often threatened by wildfires, and that is part of who I am. 2, Boulder County is beautiful and we have protected this space for a reason, and we need to continue to do so and deal with our challenges. So the climate emergency is upon us. I am terrified at night. I have a 5-year-old and a 9-year-old who need a future and a place to live, and not just my children, but children across this country and across the globe. So when I think about oil and gas development, I am thinking about us. I'm thinking about our economic vitality, about our public safety, our health, and about everybody else, because I think it's about my kids and all of yours. And then at 3, I think about what we can do together to meet these challenges. I have been here my entire life. I left for a little bit and came back, as we do. And I think we are still talking about a lot of the rhetoric we've been talking about since I was a little girl. And so we need to dive in and get to action, and that's where I can help. I'm a leader who bridges. I'm not a politician, but I love policy. I've done legislative work. I'm excited about administrative roles. I've done that, and I do that for the county. I get the systems, and I get where we can push. And 3, that judicial role, I can make strong decisions. It's a quasi-judicial role with the commissioners. They decide a huge budget and are making a ton of decisions, and I'd be honored to serve as your county commissioner.
Good afternoon. Thank you all so much for being here today. I'm Ashley Stolzman. I'm a candidate for county commissioner, and I'm currently the mayor of the city of Louisville. Back on December 30th, in East County, we had a terrible climate disaster come through our community, and it was something that I never thought could happen in suburban Colorado. We have fire hydrants, we prepare for emergencies and fight fires, and friends and family members and neighbors, about 10% of the community was devastated in just a blink of an eye. And because of that experience, I learned so much about the things that we really need to take urgent action on, addressing our disaster response and preparedness. And it really caused me to throw my hat in the ring to run for county commissioner. We have to fix our reverse 911 system. People, it's 2022, we can't expect people to sign up. It's just, there are so many things about collaborating and getting people out safely and planning for the next disaster that are urgent matters that we have to address, and that called me to action. But the good news is I've been a public official in Boulder County since 2013. I've been working really diligently on transportation issues, which are critical issues that face our communities. I've been working on adding more affordable housing to the community, and taking climate action is my passion. We've made huge strides in Louisville to reduce our emissions, and we can do more countywide. My experience as a local elected official has really brought regional collaboration to the forefront. I was elected by the 58 member governments around the region, so Denver, Boulder, Longmont, all the way down to Castle Rock to serve as the chairperson of the Denver Regional Council of Governments. And why that matters to all of you is those relationships is how we bring outside funding into our county. That's how we solve problems on a larger scale. If people live in Denver and work in Boulder, or if they live in Longmont and work in Boulder, or live in Boulder and work in Weld County, we have to get around on transportation systems that cross transportation districts, multi-jurisdictional lines, special districts, and all kinds of other things. And so we really need partnerships to be able to advance our systems and solve our problems. That's how we'll be more prepared for the next climate disaster. That's how we'll solve the problems with housing. That's how we'll work on the problems around climate. So these collaborative measures that I have taken action as the chair of Denver Regional Council of Governments or as a Mile High Flood District board member will really serve the community well. I'm ready to go on day one as a prepared leader to start fighting for causes all around Boulder County that are near and dear to my heart. And really, truly, I'm driven to make life better for people. And that's what keeps me going every day, fighting really hard and working for the people. So I hope I can be your next commissioner.
Well, as you can see, we have a couple of amazing candidates this year. I should have mentioned, just so folks are aware, we are recording this to make it available for the rest of our membership. Okay, we're going to jump to questions. So on the next slide, we sent these to you as one question, so I'm going to kind of mash it all up. But what, well, actually, let me back up. Well, the Boulder Chamber acquired Boulder Transportation Connections a couple of years ago. That's our local transportation management organization. We know that one of the key challenges is transporting our workforce and that they're living farther and farther out. So transportation is a core concern of our members, and that's why we're starting off first with a question for Boulder Transportation Connections. And that is, what are your key priorities, transportation priorities for Boulder County? What challenges do you see in addressing those priorities? And what are some of the solutions that you have in mind to address challenges? Why don't we flip it and we'll start with Mayor Stolzman and then go to Elaina.
Thank you so much. This is a wonderful question. So transportation is a critical issue that is facing our whole region and our county very, very much. We have so much in commuting every day, so much out commuting every night, and we have to move people around in a better way. So what I would say is key priorities in transportation, reducing transportation emissions is something critical that we have to do urgently in the next 10 years. And so that has to do with fuel switching and helping make sure that people and companies have access to vehicles that don't have carbon emissions and really accelerating that transition. We have to fix the issues with our public transit system. Right now, we are in a very adversarial role. The county has taken a very adversarial role with the Regional Transportation District, and they're fighting over money that's sitting in a bank. When we just leave money in the bank and we're not spending it on services for the community, we're doing no one any good. Capital's getting more expensive every day, and the people need the services now. So we have to resolve these conflicts and actually put things into action. And so there's no two ways about it. With transportation planning, our communities have spoken. There are many, many plans that have been studied and restudied and restudied. So a very high priority of mine is actually implementing some of the community's vision. That's things like the Boulder to Lyons Bikeway. That's things like getting the bikeway on the diagonal done. And that's things like making true on our promises to the communities around fast service on transit, whether it's the FF2 restoration, FF4 restoration, LX restoration, and yes, even working on front range passenger rail. There's a new vision that is very visionary from the state to have rail that goes from Pueblo up to Cheyenne. That kind of economic development, if it comes through our community, would be tremendous if there are fixed guideway stations and high-speed rail. So is this a tomorrow thing that will be done? No, but it's something we absolutely need to be at the table talking about and planning for the future. This is a 50-year type project. This is an intergenerational project. And Boulder County needs a seat at the table and strong leadership at the table to ensure that the route comes through our community and that it doesn't go on the Eastern Plains, yet we would still be taxed for it. So it's something we need to keep our eye on, and it's a very high priority. Thanks.
And we're answering all three.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's sort of one question.
All right. Yeah, so I'll start with just talking a little bit about my transportation issues living in Boulder County. And I think many of you as business owners know that your employees probably struggle some with where to live and where to work and how they're going to get to work and then how they're going to get around following work. When I think about public servants and serving the community, it would be ideal if our public servants can live in the community in which they are serving. They should know the community, they should be a part of it, and they should be serving at all times. That kind of slipped, but I think we know what I mean. Like they should have some off hours as well, but we want them engaged in the after hours. They want them to know our community. I mentioned that my husband's a nurse. He has to live within 20 minutes of Boulder Community Hospital so that he can be scrubbed in within 30 minutes when there's a heart attack. So when his pager goes off, he leaves immediately and he flies down Arapahoe in his single occupancy vehicle because it is not safe to bicycle from our house at 95th and Arapahoe down to the hospital on the Foothills Parkway in Arapahoe. So we have challenges that we could address quickly. There are places we can dig where the dirt is soft. And honestly, as somebody who is new to politics, it's easy from the outside to say it feels like transportation and mobility has been stagnant. We need new leadership and we need effective leadership. DRCOG is a wonderful place for a lot of that leadership to happen and potentially to go after funding as well. And some of the folks who serve on that have endorsed me and are excited about that as well, because we can work together and collaborate to move the needle on this issue that is so important both for workplace development and for greenhouse gas emissions and the reduction. So priorities for me are also around public safety and our cyclist safety, looking at how we can improve both up on Highway 36 and get that moving as quickly as possible, how to not get stuck as in studying over and over again when we know we need these solutions right now for east-west, for north-south, and working with our cities who have some plans as well. And how do we move that at a county level and then a regional level? So I support all of these efforts. I'd like to, again, get out of the rhetoric and into action. We can do some things with some of the funding coming in. The county commissioner's budget is over $550 million per year, plus ARPA dollars, plus opioid dollars, which are arguably tied, but we have a lot of reasons and ways that we can work together to achieve and move the needle on both transportation and mobility and housing. The last piece I would say is that trail connectivity, if we're going to have more people cycle and be able to get to work, both using electric vehicles or using electric bicycles or cycling, we need to think about that in our plans, both for housing and in planning for bicycle ways and trail connectivity. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Okay, next slide. And we're gonna do one more transportation question and then jump to general. So I'm going to rephrase this first one a little bit, which is to say that our county transportation sales tax is going to expire in 2024. That's a big deal. And there are various scenarios being proposed to maintain funding for critical infrastructure and transportation. What do you hope to see happen in light of this expiring sales tax, and what would be your approach? Now we'll flip it.
Okay.
First.
And 2-ish minutes?
2 to 3.
Okay, 2 to 3. So
The bell dings after about 3. Yeah.
Okay, I feel like I've been like yelling at you all, so I'm gonna like take it down a notch and just say, there are a lot of competing initiatives right now on sales taxes, and we have to think about both the residential and the business sales tax and property taxes, because we're asking a lot of people all at once, and budgets and taxes are moral documents. So how we use them and what we use them for can't be taken in a silo or in a vacuum, because we have a lot of different things that we're looking at, and they're all somewhat interconnected as well. So there are some initiatives on the table about both reading up this sales tax and some other options. Right now, the Boulder County Commissioners are planning on seeking public input, which is an important part of the process, both as to this and other funding sources. There's also opportunity for that outside money and federal grants. I've written a lot of grants. I've managed a lot of grants. There are a lot of pluses and minuses, and we can definitely work really hard to bring in that money to help us fund some of these projects. We know that these are areas where we could deliver outcomes really quickly if we're able to get that money and get that investment in that infrastructure built. In terms of the county's economy, I think we have a few challenges that are interrelated and separate from what I've already mentioned. One is our aging population. We're seeing a lower level of enrollments in elementary schools, and we're seeing our population age without a lot of services for them that are keeping up. In fact, one of our co-responder programs talks a lot about how many services they're providing to older people who are aging in home and without those services. And so thinking about how we can keep families living here, have our Marshall Fire families return to their homes and community and support them, and then develop plans so that we are looking at workforce and economic development with the other challenges of housing and transportation. We also need to think through how we're helping families who are here stay here. And so that is your employees, that's you all. My parents owned a small business and they worked for themselves. They were in the cycling industry, in fact, here in Boulder. So it's nice to see some familiar faces, and figuring out how we can leverage a lot of what Boulder County stands for, and thinking about both the tourism, our business development, Pearl Street, different areas where we can really hone in and say, hey, how can we fix this? I think about driving down McCaslin, the heartbreak of the Marshall Fire and what you see, and then the vacant lots where we used to have large stores, and we haven't seen any development or any kind of plans that have passed in many years. So those parking lots and what we can do with them as well.
Thank you so much. So I don't know how familiar everyone is with what the county's working on the transportation sales tax, but there's a current sales tax that's looking to sunset. And so the commissioners are studying a variety of options, from just renewing the tax to have it serve the purposes that it serves now, all the way to a very big tax increase that has, you name a project you've heard in transportation: subdivision paving, completion of fast tracks, diagonal, name a project you've heard of in transportation, and that's the high one. And I think that the high amount is too high for the community to be able to absorb it. It's just, we're already at a very high sales tax rate, and it's very expensive to live here. And people are really under a lot of pressure with all of the inflationary issues that are going on. So I think the high end, once we see the pulling back, I would guess that we will see that people just say that we can't do that. It's just way too much. And in Colorado, on the sales tax side, we tax a lot of things like food and other things. So I think that will be too far, but I do think renewing the tax is a fantastic idea. We have a lot of needs, and having that revenue come in again is really important. So I wouldn't want to jeopardize getting it renewed to be able to maintain the infrastructure that we have and continue to work on the hard projects that we've been at hard working to get completed. So I think the renewing is fantastic, and I strongly support that. In my view, the most exciting thing right now is life sciences and biopharma. We continue to have companies come into our community, primary employers that are really interested in locating in Boulder County, Broomfield County, Denver area. And so that is really exciting and interesting. And like with COVID-19, we saw how fast we got a vaccination. Some of our biotech companies here in the city of Boulder really have contributed to the successes with treating COVID-19 and some of the things there. But there's more to come. There was a ribbon cutting this morning for a biopharma company that's working on cures for cancer. We have another one of those. There are several of these in this medical space. So it's incredibly exciting. It also presents a number of challenges that all of us in this room need to focus on. And so that's thinking about all those primary employers from the Bay Area that are looking to come here right now and looking to move into this market are going to need secondary employers and secondary skills to support those companies. And that will present some very significant challenges. So we need to start working together in a different way, collaborating on solutions around transportation and housing to be able to address those needs that are going to be coming. So it's a very exciting time. There's a lot of work to be done, but it's all exciting work. And if we actually come together with public-private partnerships, I think we'll be able to resolve some of the conflicts that we will see coming in the next decade or so.
Thank you. All right, we're going to move to the last question from the Boulder Chamber, and then we're going to open it up for audience questions. But please remember, these are questions that you have to submit via the note cards that are on your table. So if you have a question for one of our commissioner candidates, please write that down. Give it to Jonathan or to Devin, and we'll be sure to get that answered for you. And after audience questions, then we'll do our 3-minute closing remarks from our candidates. Okay, so we'll start, Mayor Stolzman, with you, and then move to Elaina Shively. And so, in your view, what are the components of Boulder County's economy? What are some specific strategies that you support as a commissioner to restore and maintain our vibrancy? And what partners do you see as being critical in this endeavor?
Thank you very much. So our economy is actually fantastic in Boulder County because of the diversity. So if you think about the tech sector, we have a very exciting tech sector, brilliant people. The university really contributes strongly to that. We also have a tremendous manufacturing economy. It's fascinating to people when they learn some of the types of things we make right here in Boulder County. There's if anybody's ever been scuba diving or likes doing that, like there are only 2 companies in the world that make the filter media for the scuba tanks. It's made in Boulder County. When you look at Larabars, anybody ever eaten a Larabar? They're all made in Boulder County. When you start thinking about like the specialty foods, a lot of the meats that are not meat, the engineered processed not meat, that's made in Boulder County a lot of times. Like there's several competing companies. So there's so much exciting like manufacturing, tech, and academia that really is holding the economy together. We of course have medical things like that too. And then we have a very eclectic, cool market supporting that. And that's what people think about when they think about the community. It's like, hey, do you remember the time that I was on Pearl Street and I had this experience? And those experiential memories bring people back. And that brings a tourist economy into our town. So all of these different facets make us stronger together because when one area is hurting, another area is not and can help support and balance out. We saw during COVID-19 in Boulder County, some areas were hit much, much harder than others. Some areas actually benefited. And that was really hard to see. And what I loved about it is that the community came together and really provided direct support. I know in East County, we provided direct financial support to businesses that were hardest hit with our federal funds that came through to us because we wanted to make sure that those businesses would still be with us on the other side of the pandemic. So there are a lot of things I think we can do to support our economy. I think it's making sure that as the government, we're serving our core functions, which is public safety, transportation, making sure the community's healthy. If you didn't feel that during COVID-19 more than ever, I don't know what kind of wake up call we need. Health and safety is critical to our economy thriving, but it's just everyone's life and livelihood. And so we need to really make sure that our public health, which the county is responsible for, is responsive to the community needs and providing the support that we need. And we need to make sure that there's opportunity for all to thrive in our economy. That's another thing that the county really can focus on is partnering with the chamber and other partners to make sure that workforce development is in line with what we need for the different types of businesses that are coming for our community. So I know it was a multi-part question. I think I may have gotten 2 of the 3 parts in there, but I think it's just really important. I just want to reiterate to a point I made a little bit earlier that we think about how we expand partnerships over the next decade because there really are challenges coming our way. The world continues to get more complicated. We have these climate disasters that are hitting us. We're still in a pandemic as much as we'd all like to be done with it. And we really need to think about how these partnerships can help us get through these hard times.
I think the way we move forward is by not leaving people behind. That includes the business community, that includes our workforces, that includes making sure that when we talk about diversity and equity, we're including voices at the table that have long been left out, and that we're thinking about what people need to thrive instead of telling them what we've decided as government is needed. And so that, I think, would serve this room. You will always have a voice with me. I will listen and I will learn, and I will never pretend to be an expert on issues that I am not an expert on. I will also value the staff that works for Boulder County. There are 2,000 employees, and they're dealing with their own resiliency issues right now as well. And so really wanting to lean into how do we have an effective government and a community that works together, not in a decade, but now. And we see it. We see it when we come together in disasters. Buck and I worked on the King Soopers case. We worked with Marshall Fire Response. We see it. We can come together and we can do this. So these don't have to be partisan issues, and they don't have to be huge blown up challenges, but getting together and talking about what our vision is for Boulder County and where we're falling short and where we're meeting it, because we have a lot to be proud of. And we have a lot of ongoing challenges that predated the fire and will post-date the fire. They'll predate the next mass climate emergency and post-date that. So we have to start chipping away and working together. And I think this is a wonderful example of a group coming together and convening to support each other. The challenge, I would say, is in that resiliency. We're seeing right now that sometimes, well, let me back up actually. Commissioners, there are 3 commissioners for all of Boulder County. And this is a large county to have only 3 commissioners who also sit as the housing authority for the county. And so for any work to really get done, you have to have a vote of at least 2 commissioners. And you have to be willing to both say no to things. And I will say no. No was my first word when I was 1 or whatever, 2. I have fought like heck in courtrooms and said no to a lot of things and a lot of bad ideas. We also have to be willing to say yes. And so that means actually doing things to move us along and build that resiliency, trying new things rather than kind of the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. And that means listening to different voices who aren't a part of county government right now. And so I'd say equity is the #1 thing for me, and learning from others who have a perspective different than mine will be huge. And I think that that helps us maintain both diversity and vibrancy for Boulder County that I love. Oh, perfect.
Okay.
I timed that.
Thank you so much. All right, well, we're going to jump to our questions. I'm going to try to get to all of them. So we'll try to make it kind of a speed round. It's interesting. I have about 10 here. The vast majority are transportation and infrastructure. But since we've covered that so much, we're going to pop to what I think is probably the hardest question on this list for you guys. Do you think that homelessness should be criminalized? We'll start with Elaina.
Okay. Okay. Do I think so no, I don't think homelessness should be criminalized. I think that we can't criminalize a group of people. And so I work in public safety. Criminalizing behavior is a different thing. Has somebody broken a law? So if somebody has not broken a law, then no, they cannot be a criminal. Now, if we're talking about the camping ban that the city of Boulder has, I have challenges with how we are expecting our law enforcement to enforce that. What we have right now at the status quo is not working. And so we can't continue to try the same thing over and over again. Some of the challenges I hear from business owners and from people who are experiencing crime and different places where it just feels like there are encampments all around you and maybe people don't want to come to your business anymore. We need to think about that both with empathy for the folks who are experiencing homelessness and direct action to expand our holistic services. So I do support additional efforts to help people out of homelessness. Our unhoused population is most often struggling with mental health and substance use disorders, and we need to help them. And we know that there is some resistance and some shortages. I run a mental health diversion program. It's the first in the state. I helped implement it. Well, I implemented it with help and collaboration from the sheriff's office and the jail and community services. And I'll give you an example. We had a man who was arrested 100 times in 2019. 100 times for what we would call low-level offenses that we know are creating challenges in different parts of the community. My aunt has a homeless encampment directly behind her home, and she's having challenges. We met with that person and we said, what is your goal? We got them eventually into housing, and it was no small feat. And he had 1 arrest in 2020. Now, when we talk about outside funding and bringing that in for innovation, we had to fight like hell to get that funding. And when we talk about grants and pilot programs, that 1 arrest is a failure. So he didn't successfully complete when we look at recidivism data because of the 1 arrest. But I would argue that that is a huge success, and we need to continue to move in that direction so that we are holding both as true, so that everybody can feel safe in Boulder County and that we have opportunity. The last piece I would say is that I work with families right now who are on the brink of homelessness. And so there's a piece of this about preventing future homelessness as well. I've had clients experiencing homelessness. I have worked and talked to them. I've talked to people who are living outside right now. I work with a number of nonprofits who are serving unhoused populations. And I'm seeing families who are struggling and about to be homeless. So we need to chip away at this from all aspects. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't think that we should criminalize homelessness. We have many problems, and we're not addressing them with the existing services that we're providing. Right now, I am very proud of our county for taking a housing first strategy, but it's clearly not working, and we're not providing the services and resources people need. Like, it's very self-evident if you go to any of the cities that our strategy right now is failing the community. And so we have to do more to meet people where they are. If you talk to the mayor's groups right now, what people are hearing is that community members that need services are being shuttled around from community to community, or expected to be able to go. You know, if you live in Longmont and become homeless, you're expected to go into Boulder to get services. Or if you live in Boulder, there's some services that are only in Longmont. And people can't make those trips if they're homeless. I mean, so there are some really big challenges with how we're providing services. So we have to address those types of things. But there are very broad issues that we need regional collaboration and effort to resolve. And we can't just keep shuttling people around and pushing problems off onto each other by criminalizing something in one area and pushing it to another. So we need collective solutions. We need to work together on these things. There's a really interesting measure coming forward this fall that people are working on that would be a ballot measure that would not, it would be a without raising taxes, but it would be a statewide reallocation of resources to build more basically housing for people who are right at the median income, because we see such a shortage of housing. And housing is related to homelessness. I know maybe that goes without saying to this group, but there are many, many reasons people are struggling with being unhoused right now. And we can't expect that one solution works for every type of person. Many people in my community in the last 6 months have come to me and said, I never expected to be homeless. You just don't expect to become homeless. And it could be a fire. It could be an accident. You could get in a terrible accident and have medical injury. There's lots of reasons people become homeless and need help. So we need different strategies to help people in different circumstances. They're not all the same. And I just want to take a few moments to talk about the drug issues, because we're seeing tremendous issues with drug use and overdose, and it's incredibly complicated, and it makes, you know, resolution in a family's life or a person's life very complicated. And I oppose this war on drugs approach that the state has chosen to take. I think criminalizing people that have a small amount of drugs on their person and putting them in jail for that will lead to further problems. We have never seen this war on drugs approach work since it's ever been tried. It has just put more and more people in jail, and usually it's people of color and disproportionately impacted communities. So I think we need to be more creative than just saying we're going to double down on the war of drugs and throw everybody in jail. And I think we need to actually start working on solutions with the community to get people treatment and help, and to really reduce the amount of illegal substances that are coming into the community through dealers and things like that. So I do think the two intersect closely, and I hope to work on them together.
Thank you. I'm going to try to get through 2 more questions. This one will be a mashup of 2 of your questions. back to transportation. Both of you support improved safety for cyclists and other vulnerable users. What are your top priorities as commissioners to address these issues? And specifically, can you please address the Highway 119 bikeway and the Boulder Lions bikeway? Start with you, Ashley.
Thank you. As I said earlier, I think completing those bikeways is critically important, and they were in my list of things I listed as top priorities for transportation when that question came forward. Those 2 bikeways are critical. When you look at deaths in Boulder County and injuries in Boulder County on where they're happening in our transportation, they're happening on county roads. Even though most of us live in the incorporated areas, even though most of the driving in the VMT happens in incorporated areas, the injuries and deaths are predominantly happening on the rural roads. There's very small shoulders, the speeds are higher, there's not good bike access. So putting these critical bike facilities is really important. It's not just for like the spandex riders either. There are more and more people that can use it for commuting. There are people and families and children that can use it to go visit friends. It's a real viable transportation option, but it's only viable if it's safe and accessible. And that's why these bikeways are critical, because there are many users that are not the type of user that are going to go on a narrow little shoulder where they're next to 50 miles an hour. But if we have a bikeway that's separated from the road, then all these additional users can actually use that as a mode of transportation. I think making it so that roads are safer for all users and abilities is a critical step in reducing our emissions and making actually our communities more accessible to all. If you want to see some of the types of things that I've been supportive of, in Louisville, you can look on Cherry Street. We removed a lane. I know that was very unpopular in Boulder. I think it's really important to look at how that works and how it actually can happen, and see where there are success stories. But we've added a buffer bike lane there. We're adding bikeways all around the county. If you want people to use alternative modes of transportation, you can't shove them off onto the shoulder that's 6 inches wide, covered in gravel, never street swept. It's not gonna, that's not a viable mode of transportation, and people aren't going to risk their life in that way. So if we want to get to Vision Zero, which I do, and I hope you all do too, we need to make safe and accessible modes of transportation.
The county is taking the lead, and the 119 plans are underway to have both rapid bus transport and a bike lane that is separate from the modes of traffic. I'm sorry, the 2 lanes of traffic going both directions. That's going to help a lot. And we still need to figure out how we're going to get the Highway 36 part done. I was recently at a fundraiser with Cyclists for Community, who are trying to raise funds exactly for that project. And so we also need to work together as a community to invest in this infrastructure. We talk about the infrastructure, we talk about a Vision Zero. We still are very far from a Vision Zero. We'll hear from the sheriff candidates later today. They know, and I know too well, that we are called out on those fatalities, and they are absolutely horrific. I track my husband on his cell phone when he's out riding his road bike because I'm terrified of the traffic. And I don't like when he's on Highway 36 because I know that that is the highest area of fatalities. And it's also a great place to ride. And so we need to, it's again, a place where both is true. When we talk about vitality here, folks who are active, who want to work and live and play here, we need to lean into that so that we are giving that the infrastructure and the opportunities so that people can either commute or recreationally ride safely. And we need to actually put the money where our mouths are. And so that means finding the money. And that doesn't always mean raising taxes or asking you all. It's a way to really invest in the infrastructure because the cost and the lives lost are too many. And we hear it all the time. So, and I come from a family that wore spandex. I don't, I'm more of a mountain biker, but I will also think about education about community safety and cycling safety. So a lot of people, when I talk to, they don't know about the 3-foot rule. They don't know cyclists can take up the entire lane. And so let's work together on that as well.
All right, awesome. Okay, this question I'm going to ask is a yes or no, and then we'll match up the last 2. Okay, ready? If elected, will you prioritize funding of rural subdivision road maintenance, rehab, and reconstruction? Despite court's findings that it's the county's responsibility to cover these costs, no money is ever budgeted for it. Elaina.
Yes.
Ashley.
No.
Okay, and you can explain that later if you want. Okay, this is going to be lightning round for our final two questions. One, how do you think that we can make our agricultural community, what are your ideas to revive the agricultural community? And two, how, as the county continues to grow, how are we going to get enough water? And what does that look like?
Thank you. So on subdivision paving, I know I'm supposed to be answering a different question. I think it's a complicated issue. I think everybody who runs for office always says they're going to do it and they don't because it's too expensive and there's absolutely no way to fund it without new resources. There's also a huge equity issue with all of the communities that live in the cities that are doing their own paving of subdivisions. And so if you're taxing everyone in the county and then only paving the subdivisions for the people in the unincorporated area, there's a huge equity issue. So I do think there's a way to address it and get subdivision pavement addressed, but I don't think it comes from the general fund and I don't think it comes from existing tax revenue. On the issues with agriculture, I'm supportive of organic and regenerative agriculture. We have a lot of work to do in this area because our farmers have been here for a long time working on the land, and there's been conflict over the last several commissions. With the previous county commission, they had moved away from GMOs on farms, and then it was just flip-flopped back. So moving policy back and forth like that is really hard for intergenerational change and seeing things improve. If we want our soil health to improve, if we want to reduce the amount of water that we need to use in farms and farming, we need to support regenerative agriculture. And that means helping the farmers. The farmers are business people in our community, right? They're trying to make a life and a livelihood for themselves. And so this transition is expensive and we can't just put it all on their shoulders. And so we need to help with the resources to offset some of the sunk capital that's in sugar beets and in GMOs. And we need to help transition over into regenerative maintenance and agriculture so that the community gets the outcome that the community is looking for and helps the farmers make it a viable option that actually can have a return on investment for them. If we do that, it will use less water. We'll have crops that we can grow here that are good for our climate. We won't be growing things that you should be maybe growing somewhere else. Part of that also is really working on circular economies. So a great example of that would be with hemp farming. We have a real opportunity to restore hemp farming to the area as it was once done before it was all taken away. That can help us lower our water use. Hemp is a great product for making things like hempcrete. We don't currently have hempcrete processing, so we could get those jobs here, and on and on and on.
So on subdivision paving, how many of you live in unincorporated Boulder County? So I hear every time I meet someone who lives in unincorporated Boulder County, I hear about the roads. And I grew up on a county road that wasn't taken care of, and it can be dangerous. And I think it's an opportunity for building government trust. Because if it looks like we're not taking care of some of the simpler tasks that seem simple, people lose faith in what we are able to accomplish. So the question, I believe, was not about how we would fund it, but whether we would look at it and prioritize it. It's maybe not in the top 3 priorities, but it needs to be looked at and it needs to be a priority because I listen to the community and I'm hearing that everywhere I go. So again, let's work together and figure out how to do it. Agriculture. This is a huge part of who we are in Boulder County. And I think sometimes we forget. And so we think about economic vitality sometimes without including farmers and what they are doing, and we need farmers. And so I'm meeting with some of the young farmers and a number of folks, and one of the places I told you I wouldn't pretend to be an expert in things I'm not an expert in. I am not an expert in farming and agricultural practices. But one of the most exciting things for me to learn about that's been new to me while doing this is about opportunities on our agricultural lands. And so that means some of what was talked about today about how do we use regenerative agriculture, how do we improve those processes and make it obtainable, and how do we listen to the farmers and work with them who are not? What is that education? What are the barriers? And how do we lift up and make sure that we have the right development and economic advancement opportunities to help do some of that transition? How do we have maybe accessory dwellings on county land so that the people who are working the farms can live there? And then what do we need to develop and encourage that we're also using this in environmental approaches?
Okay, great. Thank you so much. We're going to go to a 3-minute closing each, and then we're going to switch to our sheriff candidates. Folks can hop up, get a cup of coffee, and Ashley, we'll start with you for closing.
It was really a pleasure to be here. It's, you know, you look out at a group of people and you think about like, well, what meeting was I at where I met you? And it's actually been quite a pleasure to see all your faces and get to come and speak with you today. I'm really interested in serving the community and learning more about the needs that you all have. That's what I've been doing since 2013, is working on serving the community. And sometimes that means there are conflicts, and sometimes that means there are problems. And what I've learned in Boulder County is that we really rise to the Colorado spirit, and we work through those conflicts and we get things done. And that is what's so special and cool about Boulder County, is that we can work together and really see change. We can envision something that we want and we can make it happen. Right now, I'm really called to action with disaster response and recovery, preparedness and planning. If you just drive through East County right now, you'll see that we have to do more to keep this from happening in other parts of the county. We have to make sure our evacuation routes are strong. We have to make sure that we have response systems in place so that we can minimize the loss of life and minimize the damages to people's structures and property. And we're just not there yet. So I am really called to action every day. I'm currently working on that. I will continue working on that. But I really would have a much more effective job in doing that if I was your county commissioner, because the county commissioner is responsible for so much of the budgetary authority over that whole section of your life. And I would love to be a champion in that area and make sure we are more prepared and responsive in the future. Taking climate action is a passion of mine and has been. We have to reduce our emissions. This will help us keep from having these types of wildfires if we can get it under control. There's a lot of work to be done in this area. We have to reduce transportation emissions, building emissions. We've really got to cap oil and gas wells. We have to make sure that we're doing the investigations that we need to on the permits we're already issuing on high emitters. So there's plenty of work to be done in taking climate action. And I truly am motivated every day to do that work. There is not anything I work on that I don't think about how it intersects with climate and how that matters so much to our ability to thrive as a community into the future. Climate will impact Boulder County if we don't take action. And so I think that my focus on that is very, very strong and will help our community into the future. And everyone knows right now that our transportation issues are not being addressed. So I am committed to use my years of work on Denver Regional Council of Governments to bring outside money into our community to address some of the deficiencies that we have long identified. And last but not least, like, it is about the people. And there are many human services issues that are going unmet. The county is responsible for housing and human services. They are pass-through agency from the state. And we have to do more to make sure we're providing the services that the community needs. Walk around the community and you can see people needing help that aren't getting services. And I'm committed to make sure that we do provide those services. I hope I can be your next commissioner.
Boulder County is made up of multiple municipalities and unincorporated land. And what we know when we live here is that our communities are not all the same. So Ward is very different than Louisville, which is very different than Longmont, which is different than the city of Boulder. And we have different development and social service needs that need to be worked on collaboratively, both with municipalities, with partners like you all, and with county leadership. County governance is a different beast. It's a beast I've been trying to tackle for 8 years, and I'm excited to continue to serve because we do need some reform and some more innovation. And there's areas where we've done really well and areas where we've stagnated. I'm endorsed by both of the county commissioners who will continue to serve in those roles. So Claire Levy and Marta Loscheman. They want to work with me in that role. I would complement them well with my background. So having an understanding and working specifically on opioid use disorders, specifically on legislation around how we transform the criminal justice system, and we don't use overnight jail to think that that's going to solve our issues of homelessness, and also support crime victims and families that are struggling. We need to build resiliency. We need to do better on disaster relief, and we can do that if we listen and work together and don't demand it out of people. And so a lot of what I would talk about today is that the method can get in the way of the mission. And when we do this well, we lift. So I lift the employees who work for me, I lift other county agencies, and I push back and am strong and strong-willed. And I will always ask for input. And so it's a pleasure to be here today. I'm excited to learn more from each of you. And I'm really excited to tackle a lot of these issues and to do so together. I am not afraid to lean into conflict. I'm also not afraid to try to work to resolve it and to know that sometimes incrementalism is appropriate and sometimes it's not. Sometimes slowing down is better. Sometimes speeding up is better in government. Sometimes commissioners are going to need to get into the weeds, and sometimes they need to get out of the way of the staff doing the work because they know what is happening. And we do have a lot of challenges, and mental health is a huge one. The health of our young people who are committing suicide and attempting suicide at extremely high rates. The increases in substance use disorder, folks who don't feel safe in our community, and different challenges are going to continue to plague us. And I have the expertise and the balance to bring people together and bridge it and get that work done. And that's why I'm really excited to serve my hometown and to continue to lead. Buck and I will be around. We dispatch on emergencies as well. And so I hope we can say hi to you all. Thank you.
This is so hard. Thank you for doing it. I hope that you've seen the strength and engagement of the business community. Please stick around for the sheriff debate. We're going to have a new sheriff for the first time in forever. It's an important debate. Thank you. Please remember, June 28th is this election. This is important. It's not November. It's June 28th that you vote for one of these two candidates. And thank you again. Okay, thank you for bearing with us today, but this is important. We have another really important election happening, and that is for our county sheriff. Oh, wait.
That was quiet.
Yeah. All right, we have had the same County sheriff for the last 20 years. Sheriff Joe Pelly is finally retiring after 5 terms, and he has left big shoes to fill that one of these gentlemen is going to fill. Again, this is a primary election on the Democratic ballot on June 28th, and it is my pleasure to introduce the 2 candidates, Curtis Johnson and David Hayes. Thank you so much for being here. We will start like we'll run it like we did with the commissioners. We're going to have a 3-minute opening. We'll jump to questions, and just like before, please feel free to write your questions on note cards, get them to Jonathan or to Devin, and we'll be sure to get them asked. All right, Mr. Johnson, we will start with you.
Very good. Dave and I have mutually agreed to remain seated because we're both wanderers. My name is Curtis Johnson, and I'm running for sheriff. Let me tell you a little bit about myself first. I am a product of Boulder, born and raised, also a product of Boulder Valley School District. I'm married. My wife, Janet, and I have been married 29 years. We have 2 adult children who both live in Longmont and both work in schools. So gun safety right now is a bit on my mind, given the threats to their safety, just doing their jobs. While I was in high school at Fairview, I became a cadet with the sheriff's office, and that was my introduction to policing. And I fell in love with the exposure and the experience of having a different day every day, not being tied down to a desk, and actually getting out in the community and working with people and solving problems. And after leaving town for a little while to go to college out of state, I finished a Bachelor of Arts at the University of Puget Sound in Tacoma, Washington. I then went to Washington, D.C. and finished a master's in public administration at American University, and came back to Boulder in 1993 to begin my career with the Boulder Police Department. And I worked for the Boulder Police Department for a little over 27 years and rose to the rank of deputy chief. I served both as the operations deputy chief and the support services deputy chief, which gave me broad exposure to the entire function of the police department and working in municipal policing. And in 2020, Sheriff Pelly and I had a conversation about running for sheriff. And in 2021, he recruited me away. I retired from the police department and went to work for the sheriff's office. So for the last 15 months or so, I've been working at the sheriff's office as a division chief, learning the organization and figuring out what I'm getting myself into as a first-time political candidate and someone who wants to take over the sheriff's office. There are a number of things that are important to the community with regards to the sheriff's office. It's a far larger responsibility than municipal policing because we run the county jail, which currently houses about 420 people. We also are responsible for wildfire coordination and response. And we have other crises in the criminal justice system that are impacting the way we do our work. The intersection of mental health and mental illness, behavioral health with the criminal justice system is complicated and it's a challenge, but it's one I'm willing to take on and one we're already making steps to address. We also have challenges, you heard earlier that talked about transportation. The majority of our employees at the sheriff's office don't live in Boulder County. And that hampers us because it complicates response times for getting people to work in a crisis. It also disconnects our employees from the community that they work in. And so one of my priorities is to really work hard on recruiting, hiring, and retaining a workforce that reflects the county that they work in, and also try and provide opportunities for them to live in the community where they work. I'm also passionate about women in policing. When I was at Boulder PD, I'll leave it there. We can talk more about that later. Ask a question.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I'm Dave Hayes, also a candidate for Boulder County Sheriff's Office. Thanks, John, to you and your staff for inviting us here today. I grew up in Denver, came to Louisville the first time in 1977, stayed for about a year at the police department, then went to the Boulder Police Department and stayed 36 years. Then about 8 years ago, I left as a deputy chief in Boulder and became the chief of police in Louisville. My children were raised in Louisville, went through Boulder Valley schools. Well, I guess first parochial school and then on to Boulder Valley School District. In addition to being the chief of police in Louisville, I'm also the president-elect of the Colorado Association of Chiefs of Police. I take that office in July of this year. While at the Boulder Police Department, I spent a number of years in professional standards, which meant at the time internal affairs. So dealt with a lot of people, a lot of complaints, a lot of concerns, and got very good at that. And we investigated the things that we needed to investigate. Certainly equity is at the top of our list. It's equity in how we treat the people we come into contact with. It's equity, how we treat our employees. Equity, equity, equity. While in Louisville, we implemented a body cam system long before the state mandate. We're one of the first Boulder County agencies that brought on Boulder app, which is an alternative to tasers and certainly an alternative to firearms in terms of taking people in crisis into custody. We have an in-house mental health clinician. And also, while as a chief of police, we became accredited for the first time in our history by the Colorado Association of Chiefs of Police and the County Sheriffs of Colorado. We have a great relationship with our school system, also a great relationship with our hospitals in Louisville. I've spent my career managing fires, floods, and most recently the Marshall Fire. Given the number of folks in here, I know that there's some of you that may have also been affected or people that you know. And as you may know, both Kurt and I lost our homes in Louisville due to the Marshall Fire. It's also been a very, very tough year for law enforcement, as most of you know, tough for lots of people, but in particular, I'll talk about law enforcement. And in our part of the county in Louisville, we had an individual speaking of mental health issues that called us and wanted us to shoot him. We, of course, didn't shoot him. We tried to get him mental health treatment on a couple of occasions, eventually arrested him. He was released on a PR bond. And then the next day went to Denver and strangled and beat to death an 80-year-old man. We also, over the last couple of years, we've had a police car firebombed. We've had every single Louisville police officer, their lives threatened by another person with mental health illness. So we get it and we understand there's not enough funding, there's no places, there's not enough hospital beds. So it's certainly something that we have to work on. Maybe not directly a law enforcement issue, but I think as the sheriff, one of the things that you can do is bring people together, and nobody's leaving until we figure out what we can count on each other for. And we're going to take steps, even if they're baby steps, but otherwise we just continue to play a game of whack-a-mole and just keep pushing the problem further and further down the road. It does not mean that we don't have.
I love the discipline of the sheriff.
We're rule followers, that's for sure.
That's right. Okay, we'll move to the next slide, please. How will you make sure that Boulder County businesses and residents are informed of safety protocols and resources in their community? This time we'll start with you, Dave.
Okay, well, as we know from the Marshall Fire, we have a current Everbridge system. It's our emergency notification system. It's not without its fault. It's an older system. There's a newer system called iPause, which is really based on the location on this earth where you or your phone may be. In this particular case, we elected not to use iPause, and that's probably a different discussion. But the Everbridge system is also requires that you be at home or that you have your phone or that you've registered, and it just didn't work as well as it possibly could have. We're certainly fortunate in our fire that it was the time that occurred during the day as opposed to 2 o'clock in the morning. So we need to get working on that. We are in the process of doing that. We also know that we need to get more people registered. In the city of Louisville, we've teamed up with the Louisville Fire Department, and we've got new cards out for getting people registered, and we're going to be rolling those out at the Taste of Louisville on Saturday. The other thing that we also need to work on, and really at my insistence, we discovered that during the Marshall Fire that we did not have polygons drawn, pre-drawn polygons if we need to do evacuations. So we're in the process of doing that collectively on the east part of the county. We're meeting next week in Lafayette to get that done. We also know that we have too many cars and not enough roads. So one of the things that came up in the Marshall Fire was, why don't we just evacuate the whole city? Why not do that? And the short answer is not enough room to do that. So we were very careful and calculated about where we thought the fire was going, trying to make sure that we could get people out safely. I think it was the right decision. There was still certainly some pushback to get the whole community evacuated, but I'm afraid that if that fire had gone the wrong way, we would have burned people up in their cars. So we have a lot of work to do. In addition to that, we need to move forward. We need to look at lessons learned. We need to figure out a plan for going forward. Next week, Louisville Police and Louisville Fire, and we've invited our other public safety officials, school district, hospitals, to a tabletop exercise next week in Louisville. What did we learn from all this, and what are we going to do differently? Doesn't mean that it ends next week, but what it means is we're going to continue to meet about it, and every day or every time will be continuous improvement. Also, in attendance with us will be scientists from NOAA as we figure out how the weather impacts. And we know we've already had a meeting with the NOAA scientists, and weather absolutely had an impact on this fire in terms of the wind. We certainly could do better in communicating with NOAA and making sure that our police and fire officials know about what the weather is going to be. And we also know, unfortunately, the next catastrophe is probably just around the corner. We don't have a fire season anymore in Colorado. It doesn't seem like it anyway. That year long is a fire season for us. And thank goodness for the rain that we got last week. Hopefully we'll get more rain, but if not, it really promises to be a long, hot, dry summer with lots of fire risk. So kind of to sum all that up, we need to get better at notifications.
Okay.
My turn for that one?
Yes.
Sweet. So the Marshall File's a great example, a great demonstration of how we need to expand our community information regarding disasters across the entire county. And a lot of the systems that were put in place originally were focused on the western half of the county where fires traditionally happened. And as was mentioned earlier, never in my wildest imagination did I think my home in suburban Louisville would burn to the ground from a wildfire. And that has shifted the focus on the impacts of climate change and climate disasters throughout the county. And it's got to force us to refocus our efforts on how we're going to handle disaster management. A lot of people don't realize that the Office of Disaster Management that currently exists is funded by Boulder County and the city of Boulder, and it serves the city of Boulder and unincorporated Boulder County. The other municipalities have their own emergency managers, and that created challenges during the Marshall Fire. And what I would like to do as sheriff is look at ways to bring other communities under one umbrella, so we have a centralized and coordinated Office of Disaster Management. There's already work that's been done through the County Office of Disaster Management. We have skilled professionals who already do that work, and we'd like to expand their capability and be able to involve other communities in that process so that we're all working together with the same common goals. So with that said, our current Office of Disaster Management is not as well staffed as it needs to be for preparedness work. And that's an area I'd like to work on, because there's a lot of outreach and communication that needs to occur to make sure people know how to be notified when something's going bad, how we can minimize over alerting so that we aren't evacuating people who don't need to be notified, and that we're all coordinated and responding in the same fashion under that same umbrella. There's also a huge community piece to this. I've already been working with the Niwot Community Association. They were terrified by the Marshall Fire because the Middle Fork Fire, which burned just west of there, could have burned down their community as well. And they as a community want to rally and help educate their community with help from the sheriff's office to make sure that they are prepared and aware of all the systems in place and what they need to do in response to a disaster. There are other community groups. I've met with the Boulder Rotary because they are interested in creating a model of wildfire preparedness, modeled after one that already exists in Evergreen. It was created by one of the Rotary members up there. It's called Wildfire Aware, I believe. It helps educate their community to the resources available and how they can be prepared for a disaster like a wildfire. And finally, groups like the Chamber can help us in partnering with you to get the word out to the business community, and the people that you have contact with every day will also help us share the message to be more prepared, what people need to do to make sure they're aware of disasters and how they can be ready to respond, and what to do when the next disaster, as was said, comes, because it will. Thanks.
Thank you. All right. What will be your approach to recidivism, which of course is the tendency for an offender to repeat? And start with you.
Great. So recidivism is a challenge in the criminal justice system. And I'm sure many of you are aware that our local police departments frequently arrest the same people over and over and over again. The story that Ms. Shively told about a gentleman who was arrested 100 times, that occurs more than once with multiple arrests. And I think first you have to look at recidivism at the micro level, not the macro level. Because each individual that enters the criminal justice system has different challenges that they face, whether it be behavioral health, housing, employment, all those factors that can lead to somebody committing crimes. The jail as it stands today already has a large number of programs designed to help reduce recidivism, but a lot of those have been hampered over the last 2 years because of the pandemic and the complete disruption of the criminal justice system. An example of that is pretrial supervision. It's a program that exists to supervise individuals between the time they're arrested and the time they go to trial. And in previous years, we've had rates of up to 80% where people didn't reoffend in that time frame between arrest and going to trial. Currently, that number is closer to 64%, and they're managing over 3,200 cases of individuals who are awaiting trial. And that was last year's data, 2021, over 3,200 individuals they need to manage. Looking forward, there's opportunity for us. We're about to break ground on the alternative sentencing facility, which is being built out of your tax dollars. It'll sit near the jail, but it's not a jail. It provides an opportunity for people who are eligible for community correction sentences, work release, and other programs to maintain connections to the community, which will help in their reintegration into society. There's also specific programming being developed for people housed in the alternative sentencing facility to help make sure that when they leave jail, they land on their feet with employment, opportunities for housing, and behavioral health services to help them succeed when they leave jail. Because at the end of the day, I believe recidivism is best reduced when we can set people up to succeed when they're released from custody by helping them find employment, housing, and the services they need to overcome their individual challenges. But we have to do that on a very individual level. Thanks.
Thank you. Our Colorado prison system, as we know, is failing. Repeat offenders is about 50%. System is just simply failing. As sheriff, one of the things that we need to concentrate on is crime prevention programs that keep people from being victims and also limit opportunities for defendants or would-be defendants from offending. One of the things we talked to the Attorney General about is on the Chiefs Association is maybe a Job Corps-like program. The conversation with the Attorney General was more about getting more police and more clinicians into the field, but also when people are released from prison now, there just is not a lot for them, and then we're kind of wonder why we're getting a 50% return rate. So we need to continue to work like that. We like the restorative justice program. I'm in favor of that. I'm in support of that, trying to divert people out of the system. Unfortunately, not everybody can go or is eligible for that. We also need to make sure that we continue to reinforce responsibility and accountability. Also, this also ties back to early education. Years and years ago, we had a DARE program in our schools. The idea is to get a law enforcement officer in our schools to make sure that we teach kids about the criminal justice system. That's kind of gone by the wayside. So it's really starts at an earlier age. If we want to keep people from offending, there's things that we have to do on the front end, trying to make sure that people get on the right track. At the same time, we need to make sure that we're exercising constitutional policing. And what that means is that we have to protect the rights of everyone. That means defendants, that means victims, that means witnesses. What we can't do is we can't go back in a dark part of our history where we had the Nazis taking over Germany and we had German municipal police officers standing by while those atrocities were taking place. Our police cannot be put in those positions. They don't want to get put in those positions. Again, constitutional policing for everybody. I would certainly continue all the programs that are in the jail. And besides, as we know, besides medical, dental, we've also got the mental health component to all this. We also have to consider the safety of victims, the safety of the community at large. So it is a balancing act, and it's a balancing act every day. What's best? What we do in Louisville when we have a person, because we've got Centennial Peaks Hospital, if they're also involved in criminal activity, we call the on-call DA, we call the staff nurse at the hospital, and we call the police supervisor and say, what's best for this situation? Do we have the person, do they release them from the hospital? Do they stay in the hospital? What's the safety plan? Knowing that every case is different. We certainly could be offering some additional programs in the jail, some educational opportunities. And of course, we have to work on introducing those folks back into the world or back into society. One of the things we've also learned in policing is no matter how bad the person is, no matter what crime they've committed is, one of the things we should not do is take away their self-respect. The sheriff is responsible for engaging our community, sheriff and his staff, making sure we're engaged with our communities, our families. And by the way, most of what we do in Boulder County is not law enforcement. Most of it has to do with the community. And stop there.
Thank you so much. This is the final question from the Boulder Chamber. As before, please be sure to get your questions onto cards over to Jonathan and to me. We've got some great questions already. All right, well, with this legislative session's passage of HB 1303, which will add more beds to behavioral health facilities, how will you make sure that community members who need behavioral health assistance get the help that's needed while also protecting businesses? And Dave, we'll start with you this time.
Well, we need to continue to work what's already been going on in the county for both juveniles and adults. We do have some additional funding, but as we know, we're also having a shortage, not only of officers, but also of clinicians. Again, we just need to do more. And part of that means that we have to get the right people together in the right room, again, all doing well, but what are our next steps? I mentioned the shortage of clinicians. We've also got a shortage of bed space. We have examples now where somebody's been brought in on their 72-hour hold, and they could be in one of our hospital emergency rooms for 72 hours. And if you've been in a hospital emergency room, you know that that's certainly not a place for mental health treatment, nor is it a place to get any kind of a rest. Continue to work with that. We are going to be working with the Attorney General, Phil Weiser, on trying to get some additional mental health clinicians. So we have lots of good programs in Boulder County. We need to continue those, but we also need to know that's a short-term fix. On a longer-term fix, additional facilities. One of the possibilities that I've talked about with the Vista Hospital, who's trying to move to a bigger building in Louisville, maybe that's a mental health facility, because there's simply not enough places, not enough beds. Let's see. We've also got, there has to be we want oversight for people that may be struggling in the system. Jail may not be the right place for them, but we've got programs like PACE. The problem is PACE is overloaded. So we could also sometimes make the situation worse for a person who then doesn't really have any oversight. And we're saying now go out and take care of yourself and expect that they're going to take the medication and that they're going to do what they can do to keep themselves healthy. So again, longer term approach, my vision for all this is we get the right people in the room and we talk about next steps and not continue to play the whack-a-mole. We need a long-term fix.
Thank you. Curtis.
So House Bill 1303 is a great step forward in addressing behavioral health challenges that we have in the criminal justice system, but it's also years down the road. I've had the opportunity to talk at length with the bill's primary sponsor, Judy Amabile. She's a champion for mental health and a supporter of my campaign. And we both agree on one thing fundamentally, that oftentimes jail is not the best setting for people with behavioral health issues to get those needs addressed. And what can we do to move people out of the jail system and into other locations where they can get the services they need to succeed and hopefully find stabilization. The first opportunity that we have at the Sheriff's Office to engage with people in crisis is on the patrol level, with patrol deputies and co-responders, and making sure that they're aware of other resources that are available to them should they choose to not introduce somebody into the criminal justice system, but find a different place for them to go. These beds may be an opportunity for us in the future to be able to divert people out of the criminal justice system and get them the help they need in a facility other than a jail setting. Our second touch point is when people are arrested and do enter the jail setting, will we be able to transition people out of the jail setting into these beds to get the treatment they need in a better setting than the jail? So as I mentioned, jail is not necessarily the most healthy, helpful place for someone in crisis to find stabilization. And despite all the resources that we put into trying to work with people and their behavioral health issues in the jail, it's still a jail at the end of the day. I also want to make sure that we continue the robust evaluation system that we have in the jail to make sure that we're assessing people coming in and finding eligible candidates for bed space outside of the jail. We do a good job of that right now. The challenge is we don't have a place to take them. And of course, this space, the additional space that 1303 will provide for us is going to take time to develop. And there's going to be a lot of discussion about policy decisions on who's eligible for that bed space, how it's utilized, and how it's allocated. Because while it's a great step forward, it's still not going to be enough to solve the problems we're facing right now with behavioral health in the criminal justice system. But as sheriff, I look forward to being included in those policy discussions and advocating for our county and making sure that we have the opportunity to use that space to our advantage to get people in our community the treatment that they need outside of a jail setting. Thanks.
Curtis. Okay, well, we're going to move to questions from you guys, from our members. Curtis, we'll start with you for this one. How would you plan to address the social and emotional health of your staff, knowing that they regularly face animosity and challenging situations?
So employee wellness is something that I take very seriously. And I'm proud to say we have a very robust system at the Sheriff's Office that involves not only an employee assistance program, a peer support program, and opportunities for counseling with counselors that are paid for through a state grant for peace officers. And we make that system very available to our employees. In fact, recently we deployed an app to all of our employees, which links them to wellness services. It also allows us to track data, not individualized data, but give us a read on how people in our organization are doing. And for us to have a well-rounded, well-intentioned, and well organization, as leadership, we need to set the example and not be afraid to also admit to our own challenges. As Dave mentioned, we both lost our house in the fire. That was a huge challenge for me personally, and having to work through that, agree that process, and being vulnerable to my employees and demonstrating the humility of the process helps set an example for them that they are welcome to seek help and that their leaders seek help and know when they need help, because I needed help in January. And I'm not afraid to admit that, and I will talk to my employees about that. So I think building a culture of wellness is important for us, because you're right, there is a lot of animosity towards law enforcement. It's a challenging work environment. We are struggling to retain employees and hire employees. I don't know if that was a ding. All right, so that is well on my mind, but I think we have a good foundation for that, and continuing to look for grants and opportunities to fund programming to keep our employees both in their best physical condition, but also in their excellent mind condition that they bring to work every day is important to me.
Thank you. We also have a peer support program and also an employee wellness program. So certainly it's been some challenging years for us in the Louisville Police Department. I mentioned our in-house mental health clinician. That's really not for the staff, but what we've done for our staff is we've made there's a Denver psychologist that has a lot of expertise in first responder care. And so we started off during COVID. We had some fireside chats with him, first as a group. We were sending our men and women out on calls, still responding on calls when we didn't have any idea even much about COVID, how fatal it was or how fatal it could be. So we put together some fireside chats where, as a group, we thought that would be more comfortable for our employees, and then they could make an appointment privately with the doctor. What I get in Louisville is a bill that's just a generic bill that says that somebody went to go see the doctor at some point, and here's how much it costs. So we know we are getting that program used. And then certainly we all are familiar with the disaster we had at King Soopers, the shooting there. That day we had Louisville officers there, as many agencies had people there. On the day after, or the second day maybe after that occurred, we had a number of psychologists come to the police department to be available for our staff. And then we did the same thing after the services for Officer Talley. It's a very, very difficult job, like many of you may have, but it was just a lot for our first responders to go through. And we're going to continue that. When I'm the sheriff, we're going to continue to offer those services. We've got to keep our first responders safe and healthy so they can continue to have a long, happy career and eventually get to retirement.
Okay, thank you. I recognize 12 to 2, it's a long lunch break, but bear with us because this is such an important conversation. And we have 2 questions here that I'm going to mash up, and they kind of flip the script from the last one, which is really that the sheriff's office has been in the news for inappropriate taser use, and the court has come down on the office right after they did. Another taser incident occurred. What do you think this says about the culture in the office, and what can you tell us about the need for change? And kind of along those lines, there have been more than one instances of aggression when it comes to officers at the jail. What would you do to change the climate in the jail? And we'll start with you, Dave.
So one of the first things I did is becoming chief in Louisville is we established a value-based management system. What guides us And we do things really well, and three things really well in the Louisville Police Department. We investigate beyond the obvious. We make things better than we found them, and we don't care about race, ethnicity, sex, sexual preference, and certainly don't care about anybody's immigration status. We provide constitutional policing, period. The incidents that I think they've all been in the newspaper, we might as well just go through those a little bit. We had an individual, a young man of color, that was brought in from Longmont into the jail. Probably not the most cooperative person. I think he had a spit sock on his head, but was in restraints in a chair in the jail. And we had an on-duty police sergeant torture him with a taser. That's bad enough, but that same day, or within a day or two of that, Boulder County settled with another person, same thing had occurred to, and they settled with her for about, I think it was $700,000 of the taxpayers' money. So that what that suggests to me is that there needs to be some culture adjustment in the sheriff's office. By and large, they're good men, good women, men and women working in the department, but there is some adjustments that need to happen to the culture as to why that occurred. We also know that we had a couple of deputies transporting a young person, a CU student that had too much to drink. They didn't care for that individual, even though they could see the back of the van in their camera, and eventually that individual died. They were indicted and convicted and now sentenced in the Department of Corrections for manslaughter. Those incidents, although few, if you want to count them on one hand, but that what they would suggest is it's time for a culture change, and there needs to be some kind of a reset and certainly a conversation. And what I would do is, what we've done in Louisville, when we've made a policy change, we had an officer involved shooting. I sat down with each and every employee one-on-one and in a group setting, and we talked about why we were making the policy change and what the expectations were. So those things should not have happened. And the fact that they occurred one after another in case of the tasing incident, and then those deputies, the lack of care, if you will, for that young man that just had his crime, if you will, or why they were trying to take him into custody was that he had too much to drink.
So I won't recap the incidents because my opponent already did for you, but I am aware of them. And after a policy change, a significant policy change in the jail, the second incident of tasing someone in a restraint chair occurred. And that was outside of policy and was addressed quickly. That individual, the employee, actually was reported by other employees as having done it, which is a positive for the culture, that they're willing to hold their peers accountable and report misbehavior. But summarily, that employee was terminated from employment. The case was referred to the district attorney for prosecution, and the individual was prosecuted successfully, which is appropriate and the right thing to do. Similarly, the jail van transport, I actually worked at Boulder PD when that happened. And following that case closely, it was an incredible mistreatment of an individual that resulted in a criminal prosecution, termination of employment. And both those individuals are currently serving time in the state prison system, the two former deputies. So while there is some culture of accountability on the back end, there may be need for culture change within the organization about how we treat people. But having just looked at the most recent use of force data for the jail, I can tell you that taser use in the jail, following the policy change and following the incident where the employee was terminated and prosecuted, has dropped dramatically, which is a good thing. People in full restraints should not have a taser used upon them. And so I do believe there is time to review policy and review how the jail operates. Neither of us are career jail employees. It's a challenging place to work, and I understand that. But at the end of the day, the sheriff is ultimately responsible for the health, safety, and welfare of anyone who's housed in that facility. And you have to take responsibility for the actions of your employees and hold them accountable. And I am absolutely on board with doing that.
Okay, our final questions. This is a lightning round, so I'm going to ask both questions. You can answer both. Then we'll hear closing remarks from you guys, and then our president, John Taylor. One, the Boulder County Sheriff's Office signed off on a change to the Boulder County Communication Department notification system on April 15th, 3.5 months after the Marshall fire. Why was this policy put into action without any collaboration and input from local fire chiefs, from Louisville, Lafayette, etc.? And two, Boulder County residents feel less safe than they did in the past. Lawbreakers are not being held accountable due to limited jail space. Some are serious repeat offenders. What will you do to improve the situation? And Dave, we'll start with you.
So I'll start with the emergency or with the, gather my thoughts here a second. So in terms of the change that I think the person asking the question is, how do we notify the community, our emergency notification system? That change came about 3.5 months after the Marshall fire. The concern that I have as the chief of police in Louisville is that there was no input, certainly from the city of Louisville or the Louisville Fire Department, where most of the homes were lost. When I did ask about that, what I was told was in the next several weeks or months to come that they may consider input. We had some concerns about the policy. We raised those concerns. We talked about it again a couple of weeks ago. I think there may be some movement on that, but we need to be more collaborative. And as sheriff, I would be more collaborative. And if you're going to ask the agencies that you serve or the agencies that you contract with in terms of communications, you should be collaborating with them about what works in their particular agency. And if you could go back to the second one again for me.
Oh, yeah. People feel less safe than ever, and there's limited jail space. How are we going to improve the situation of repeat offenders?
Well, yes, certainly COVID has had a lot to do with that, but I can tell you that we still have folks that are wanted for felony warrants, either out of Boulder County or wanted out of another county, but we find in Boulder County or Boulder County warrants that cannot be taken to the jail. The other day, we contacted an individual that was intoxicated in front of a business that's laying on the ground. I think he had 14 warrants, both out of Boulder County and out of Broomfield County. Neither of the jails would take him. We need to figure out, and I will figure out as the sheriff, is what's the better way to do this. Maybe at the very least, we bring these individuals into the jail, have the judge talk to them, set some additional bond conditions, order them into treatment. But what's happening now is if a person can't be taken into the jail, our criminal justice system requires that we have a defendant. If you don't have a defendant, you don't have a victim. So you could be the victim of a crime now in Boulder County, and because the defendant can't go to the jail, can't be arrested on a warrant, he or she holds the whole system hostage. And if you're a victim, then you're just kind of waiting and wondering, and absolutely creates a feeling of unsafeness or not feeling safe in a community when there's people that can't be taken into the jail. So we need to figure that out.
Thanks. So with regard to dispatch policy, Dave and I have talked about this because currently the dispatch center is under my purview. And the reality for us is we committed to the community that after the Marshall fire, we would implement the iPause alerting system by mid-April and get it done so that it worked, so that for the next disaster, it was ready to go. And to do that took a number of hours and time to train people on the system, to coordinate with FEMA to make sure that we had everything in place to be able to do the system, and finally to have policy in place. And the dispatch policy, the policy itself is really directed at how dispatchers do their jobs, not at how individual agencies request or ask for evacuations. And those agencies like Louisville PD can set up their own policies for who should make alert and warning decisions, how they should communicate that to dispatch, and then how dispatch will follow through and launch the alerts. With regards to jail space and the challenges that we're facing in community safety, I got to tell you, it's not getting better. Right now, we have more COVID cases again back in the jail, which means we have to be very careful about the number of people we bring into the jail. And we also have a criminal justice system that for almost 2 years has been stopped and literally plugged up. And the holding spot for that is currently the Boulder County Jail. On a typical year, pre-COVID, about 60% of the people in the jail are pre-trial defendants. They're awaiting trial. And about 40% are serving an actual sentence in the county jail. Currently, those numbers are almost flipped. We have 87% of the people in jail that are awaiting trial and only 13% that are sentenced to be there, which means 87% of the people in the jail are waiting for the court system to make movement on their cases so that we can progress those people through the system. That creates a giant backlog. And I'm afraid that it's going to take 18 months or 2 years to clean it up. And it's a challenge for us. It's a challenge for the district attorney's office. It's a challenge for the judges. And until we can figure out a way to get cases accelerated through the system, jail space is going to be very hard to come by. Again,
Wow, I am so impressed with both of you. This is your opportunity now for 3 minutes of closing remarks, and then our president, John Taylor, will wrap up. It was an honor to moderate today's debate. We'll start with you for closing remarks.
Thank you. First, I would thank you very much for your time today, or you're giving up your time to meet with us today. I would encourage you to look at my website. I think what you'll see is that I'm a proven leader with proven accomplishments. throughout my career, both at Boulder and at Louisville. I'm the only candidate with executive law enforcement experience. I've been the police chief in Louisville for the last 8 years. Very collaborative, number of accomplishments. We've talked about those: mental health clinician accreditation process, body cams even before the mandate. I do a lot of work in the community. We spend time and collaborate with our hospitals, trying to make sure that we're on the right track with them. Just this week, we met with Centennial Peaks Hospital. Same thing with the schools. We work closely with our faith community in Louisville. In fact, I hate to even use this name because I didn't name it, but with the Cent Church, we work with them, and they've named something called Chief Hayes Charities. What that means is a couple times a year, people of need report to the church or ask the church for help, or our officers see that people need help. And 2 times a year, we go out with volunteers from the police department, volunteers from the church, and of course myself, and we do what needs to get done, whether it be yard cleanup or mowing lawns or whatever it may be. We need to work on the citizen notification system. We are going to work on that. We are going to get it done. We don't have a polygon yet done for Eastern Boulder County. We hope to get that done in the next month or so. There's also some issues and some concerns about how we dispatch fire equipment. And the example I will give you is that way we're dispatching fire departments now is it could be a cold winter day with snow on the ground. They get X fire equipment. On the day of the Marshall fire, 110-mile-an-hour winds, give or take, dry weather, dry ground, we sent the same amount of fire equipment. Our fire chiefs in Eastern Boulder County have been asking for a change, and I'm not sure what the best word to use is, other than I'll use the word stonewalled, or we don't have time, or we can't figure this out. As the sheriff, my commitment to you is we are going to get that figured out in pretty short order. We need to listen to the fire chiefs and our fire managers, what they want, how they want to get dispatched. They're the experts. Our job is to get people out the door and to push the right buttons and talk on the radio. Joe Pelly's done a great job as the sheriff. I've been sheriff for the last 20 years. Interestingly enough, both Joe Pelly and Kirk Johnson both worked for me at the Boulder Police Department. So I'm proud that Joe has done well and moved on to be the sheriff. I talked about the culture change involving the just a couple of things that have occurred. We need a contemporary value-based management system, which includes transparency. We need to be collaborative. And what we're going to be about is the new sheriff is going to be safety, community, and quality of life. Again, I mentioned what we do in Louisville. 3 things we do really well. We make things better than we found them. We investigate beyond the obvious, and we don't care about somebody's race, sex, ethnicity, sexual preference, and certainly don't care about their immigration status. Be proud to be your next sheriff.
I know you're all itching to get out of here, so I'll keep this fairly brief. But I've spent the last 29 years of my career and my life providing public service, public safety services in Boulder and Boulder County. And I'm in a very unique position right now where I have spent a significant part of my career policing the city of Boulder. And I understand the challenges of policing in the city of Boulder, but I've also had the last 15 months of my life working under Joe Pelly and learning the ins and outs of the sheriff's office and figuring out from an outsider's perspective what needs to change moving forward, where there are opportunities to advance the organization. Dave's correct. Joe Pelly's been a great sheriff for 20 years, but anyone who's been in the same leadership position for 20 years, you can find an organization getting stagnant, not being as innovative as it should be, not willing to take risks and advance the organization. And that's my challenge moving forward. They say never follow a legend, but I'm down for that, and I'm going to give it a shot. Because I get to bring that outsider's perspective to the organization while already having the experience of understanding the complicated nature of the entirety of the sheriff's office and the 460 or so people that work there. Previously, my opponent has mentioned that I have a lot of endorsements and those shouldn't matter. But I want to tell you that being endorsed by Joe Pelly to succeed him does matter. Being endorsed by Michael Doherty, our district attorney and one of our closest collaborators in the criminal justice system, is important. And I've spent the last 9 months building relationships with elected leaders and other leaders in this community because I believe it is critically important as sheriff to build and maintain those relationships, to advocate for our community, and most importantly, to keep Boulder County the safe and vibrant community that we all want it to be. So I appreciate the opportunity that you've given us to be here today, and I thank you for your time. And I look forward to being your next sheriff in Boulder County. Thanks.
So unscripted moment for me to just say a few words of appreciation. So first of all, appreciation to our sponsors. I want to make sure WW Reynolds and Google get thanked for helping us to put an event on like this. I want to make sure to thank all of you. Just the fact that you are here today with us for this extended period of time shows your dedication to what happens, not just in the city of Boulder, but regionally. We know that the Boulder Chamber is focused on our economic well-being, and it is not a localized issue. It is a community-wide regional issue that we need to make sure we're addressing. And these are the individuals who are going to be working with us on those challenges. In particular, I want to thank, she just took off, our youngest participant, Gwendolyn, Jonathan's daughter. She stuck it out. So big round of applause. I also want to take this opportunity to thank the Chamber staff team. This is a very important event for us to make sure that we well represent the candidates in these races. I know that we're going through a transition, and so I thank Devin Edgley, who supported this work. I thank Jonathan Singer, who came in, and this was his first assignment. But I also want to thank my great friend and somebody who I'm going to miss very much, who just did a lot of work to pull this off, but has done great work representing the Boulder Chamber's advocacy team. And that's my good friend and newly engaged partner, Jill Grano. So thank you. And then finally, I want to thank the candidates. I should say that it's miserable when you're in this situation because we have just such excellent quality candidates. You heard them talking about their passion and commitment and their understanding of the issues in our county. So I see Ashley in the back. We have Elaina and two excellent candidates for the sheriff's role. And so we're blessed to have this quality of candidates, these folks looking to go forward in their service to our community. And I just thank you so much for putting it out there. And we look forward to serving and working with all of you in various capacities. One of you as sheriff and one of you as Boulder County Commissioner, but in these roles going forward. So thank you so much for your time.